Drunk, he pinned his wife to the bed. Her response was a desperate, panicked scream and a call to 911. After the cops mediated, she magnanimously said she didn't blame him. Back then, all he could think about was protecting her, protecting their adopted son. He dedicated his life to it. But when he was old and frail, lying in a hospital bed, he watched his wife and another old man clasp hands, tears in their eyes. The profound love between them seemed to mourn all the years they'd lost, and his own son, the boy he'd cherished for decades, scolded him. "You're the one who ruined their lives." That's when he finally saw it. The son he'd adopted bore a striking resemblance to his wife. He died from the shock. When he opened his eyes again, he was looking at the face of his young wife, twisted with disgust. Fueled by the alcohol still buzzing in his veins, he moved toward her, but before he could do anything, she was already spitting venom. "I can't believe you're this kind of person. Is that all you men think about? Can't you live without it? You better let me go right now. I've already called the police." Seeing her revulsion, his head still swimming in a fog, he lost his balance and stumbled backward, collapsing onto the sofa. His wife, Dr. Elena Rossi, her ragged breathing slowly evening out, smoothed her messy hair and tried to compose herself. "You shouldn't drink anymore," she said, her voice strained. He didn't answer. The weight of a long-aged life had made him slow. His gaze landed on her face, but he was seeing their son's features superimposed over hers. The resemblance was undeniable. He just never let himself see it before. He'd always told himself it was just one of those things that people who live together for a long time start to look alike. He ignored the fact that he looked nothing like him. Of course he didn't. He wasn't his son. The piercing wail of a siren cut through the night. Evelyn leaned against the wall, arms crossed, having already resumed that untouchable goddess on a pedestal air she always wore. A cold smirk touched her lips. "Aiden, are you aware that even in a marriage forcing yourself on your partner is a crime?" Oh, he was aware. How could he not be? In his last life, this incident became a huge scandal in their circle. Everyone looked at him with the same mix of pity and contempt. He guessed they couldn't fathom a man who couldn't even handle his own wife, who almost ended up in jail over it. After the police mediated, Elena, who had been performing her role as the outraged victim, told him in a tone dripping with condescension that she could forgive him. He was like a trained dog waiting for her command. A soft, knowing laugh escaped his lips, the kind of weary tolerance only old age can grant. His voice was flat. "I know. So what are you going to do? Press charges? This kind of thing rarely goes anywhere. We had the marriage certificate. Even if I'd beaten her half to death, what would have happened? The world is always more forgiving of men. Not that I ever would. I was too well-mannered for that." His calmness seemed to enrage her. "What's that supposed to mean? Is that a threat?" she snapped. "You're the one who can't live without me. You're the one who begged to be with me. I just can't accept this kind of behavior. If you can't handle it, then let's just get a divorce." Before he could answer, a sharp knock echoed from the front door. Elena shot him a glacial look and went to open it. Two police officers stepped inside, their eyes taking in the disheveled living room. Seeing that they weren't actively fighting, one of them asked, "Who called 911? "I did," Elena said, glancing back at him before giving them a brief, edited version of the events. One of the officers walked over to him, his voice stern. "You look like a decent guy. What are you doing pulling something like this? What's your relationship to her?" A pointed finger in his chest, then gestured to the large wedding photo hanging on the wall. "I'm her husband." The officer's words caught in his throat. He looked helplessly at his partner. He then pointed to the framed family photo on the coffee table. "And that's my son. He's 8. In his last life, he was blackout drunk. He only sobered up at the police station, drowning in guilt as Elena interrogated him. He couldn't defend himself, so he just let her dictate the outcome. But now, hearing him speak, Elena's anger flared. "That doesn't give you the right to force me." The cop scratched his head, ready to play peacemaker. "Domestic disputes are always messy." He said. She said, "Nightmare nobody wants to untangle." He chuckled dryly. "We were just fighting. She's out of temper. Sorry to waste your time." The officers still hesitated, turning to Elena. "Ma'am, would you feel safer coming with us to the station?" It was a genuine offer of protection, a way out in case she was afraid of what he'd do after they left. But Elena's face darkened. "I'm not the one who did something wrong. If you're taking anyone, it should be him." Elena was brilliant, no doubt, but her genius was confined to academia. When it came to real-world social cues, she was as naive as a college freshman. With no real crime committed, they left after giving him a stern lecture. As they walked out, they reminded Elena that she could call again if she felt unsafe, that they could help her find a place to stay for the night. She didn't take them up on it. Once the apartment was quiet again, he broke the silence. "You said you want a divorce, right?" "I agree." Elena's head snapped toward him. In his previous life, divorce never crossed his mind. Her physical issues weren't a deal-breaker for him. He was willing to spend his entire life by her side, believing he could eventually melt the ice around her heart with his warmth. He gave everything for her, for their adopted son. But what did he get for a lifetime of devotion? Lying on his deathbed, he got the news that she had reunited with her first love. Two seniors, teeth nearly gone, holding hands in front of him, their tear-filled eyes speaking of a love story he had interrupted. And his son, the son he raised, accused him of ruining their lives. It was enough to kill him on the spot. His death was quiet, his life history intentionally buried. The public only remembered that Dr. Elena Rossi, the renowned economist, had reunited with her long-lost love after being widowed. The star-crossed lovers, separated for 60 years, finally found their happily ever after. The world cheered for them. And him, the man who spent his life beside her? He was a footnote in their love story, a nameless extra. The few times he was mentioned, it was only to say that he was the obstacle that had kept them apart for so long. After hearing him agree to the divorce, Elena said the exact same thing she'd said in their last life. "Aiden, why can't you believe me? Whether we do that or not, it doesn't change how I feel about you." "Yeah, right. Tell me another one." His lack of reaction clearly troubled her. "Aiden, divorce isn't a game. We shouldn't make decisions when we're angry." She turned and walked away, giving him the silent treatment. She assumed, like always, that he'd eventually come around. At 4:30 a.m., his alarm went off. He smirked, shut it off, deleted it, and pulled the covers back over his head. "Dad, I want your famous bolognese. You haven't even started the sauce yet. I'm gonna be late." Matteo knocked on his door. His intelligence was all Elena, but his personality, the obsessive-compulsive tendencies, the germophobia, was a perfect 10. Since he was little, he'd insisted on only eating meals he prepared himself. "Ask your mother," he mumbled, pulling the blanket tighter. He froze, standing there for a moment before slamming the door shut. After sleeping in, he felt fantastic. He dialed a number he hadn't called in years. "Isla Chun, I heard you're back in the States starting a new venture and dating some celebrity. Some guy named Marco something." The first thing he did after being reborn was Google Marco Bellini. As an A-list heartthrob, his information was everywhere. The entertainment blogs said he was about to star in a huge blockbuster backed by a mysterious, deep-pocketed investor. He was a pay-to-play, and he remembered something else. Just before he died, he'd overheard the nurses gossiping. Marco Bellini had married an overseas heiress, Isla Chun. She had passed away 3 years prior from an illness, and they had no children. That made things simple. No one knew that when he was 12, he was fostered by the Chun family for a year. He was briefly Isla Chun's older brother. She confessed her feelings for him back then, but he fell for Elena. To avoid any messy entanglements, he cut off all contact with the Chuns. Who could have guessed that by doing so, they would both end up as the forgotten first spouses of Elena Rossi and Marco Bellini, destined to die early? When he met Isla, he got straight to the point. "I'm getting a divorce. If things get ugly, it could destroy your boyfriend's public image. You might want to reconsider bankrolling his career." After that, he dropped all his domestic duties and focused on painting in his friend Stefan's gallery. He had a lifetime of pent-up frustration to release, and he poured all of it onto the canvas. Elena found him there. He was holding a palette, brush in hand, splattered with so many colors he looked like a construction worker covered in grime. Her brow furrowed in disgust at the sight. When it was clear he wasn't coming out, she hesitantly stepped inside. "Aiden, you know Chloe Lynn. Did her decision to pull funding from the movie Shattered City have anything to do with you?" Isla, ever the businesswoman, worked fast, no hesitation. He kept painting. "Since when does a distinguished professor like you follow Hollywood gossip?" Elena was quiet for a moment before choosing her words carefully. "The lead actor's agent contacted me. This film is very important for their career." He didn't buy for a second. "What has Marco Bellini to you?" She flinched, adjusting her glasses. Aiden, I don't know him. It's just. Elena, what do you think of this painting? He suddenly put down his brush and stepped aside. On a massive canvas, a fiery sunset bathed a vast, empty mountain range in red. A simple man carrying two heavy baskets walked along a crimson path. Aiden, you know I don't understand art about Shattered City. His fingers traced the outline of the baskets. Do you know what he's carrying? He asked, his voice low. It's charcoal. He turned to face her, a cold smile on his face. The sun is about to set, and the stones under his feet will grow cold. But if he's carrying charcoal, he can use the last rays of sunlight to set the path ahead on fire, to keep it burning long into the night. Aiden, that doesn't make sense. Charcoal isn't that heavy, and sunlight can't ignite it. The physics are all wrong. Exactly. It's a lie told to an honest man. The sun will always set. The road ahead will always be dark. The foolish man in the painting was him, for his last life, chasing Elena as if she were the sun, carrying Mateo in his baskets like he was his last ember of hope. On and on, deceived by a lie, carrying a burden that wasn't his. He stared at the painting, then suddenly grabbed a bucket of black paint from the floor and hurled it at the canvas. Paint exploded everywhere. The piece he'd spent 3 days on was now just a thick black shroud, a funeral for the stupid, stubborn man he used to be. Lies, he roared, breathing heavily as he glared at her. None of it was real, just like you could never love me. He took a deep breath. So please, Dr. Rossi, grant me the divorce. Don't settle. Aiden Russo has other options. Elena's expression froze, a flicker of fear mixing with her shock. Other options? She asked, her voice trembling. You mean Islachin? In that moment, she finally seemed to understand. His decision to leave was real. 2 days later, Marco Bellini and his agent showed up on his front door. The moment he stepped inside, he tilted his chin up, surveying the apartment like a king inspecting his domain. Young Marco Bellini was handsome, no question, but that condescending air, that way of looking at people like they were ants, was identical to the old man he would become. Clearly life had been very good to him. Elena played the gracious host, offering them seats and making introductions. The proud, brilliant professor, usually so above it all, was now willingly playing the part of a sycophantic go-between for the man she loved. Mr. Russo, what's your relationship with Isla? Marco asked, sinking into an armchair with an affected casualness. Asking for a favor and still putting on airs. We were almost a thing, he said slowly, studying him. To her, I guess you could say I was her first love, the one that got away. His expression flickered. Elena, holding a teapot, paused midair and shot him a sharp look. Aiden, you never mentioned that before. A good ex is supposed to act like they're dead, right? I've done a pretty good job of that all these years, haven't I, Elena? The room went silent. The agent let out a soft hiss, as if he'd just bitten into a lemon. Then why are you contacting her now? Why are you coming after me? Marco demanded, throwing the trendy baseball cap he was wearing onto the coffee table. The metal chains on it clattered loudly against the glass. He was really making himself at home. He shot a meaningful glance at Elena. I heard she was seeing someone, he said deliberately. I wanted to see if she still had feelings for me. If she does, well, that could get complicated. This is unbelievable. Aiden, have you forgotten you're married? You have an 80-year-old son. Marco shot to his feet, pointing a long, manicured finger at him. He stood up and slapped his hand away. So what if I'm married? Does being married mean you can't think about your first love? EW. I don't just think about her. I could probably get her to stay celibate for me. You mad? Go on, hit me. Marco finally seemed to realize something was wrong. A flicker of panic crossed his eyes, and he instinctively glanced at Elena. They shared a look of bewildered suspicion before quickly looking away. The agent was completely lost. Mr. Russo, how can you say things like that? Your wife and son are right here. Sometime during their standoff, Mateo had come downstairs. He'd been standing there, listening, for who knows how long. His eyes were wide with disbelief. Dad, is it true? Have you been ignoring me because you're thinking about some other woman? His voice trembled. Are you really going to leave me? Marco, furious, shot Elena a venomous glare. She rushed to Mateo's side. Mateo, sweetie, your dad is just angry with me. It's okay. Go back upstairs, we'll handle this. Mateo ignored her, his eyes fixed on him, waiting for his answer. He pretended not to notice him and casually sat back down. Sweetie, how ironic. They probably picked a name that sounded like his so she could say it out loud without raising suspicion. Once Mateo was back upstairs, Elena turned to him, her brow furrowed. Aiden, adult problems shouldn't involve children. This is not healthy for him. What a joke. She had the nerve to say that to him, as if her adult problems hadn't defined his entire life. Was he, a man in his prime, supposed to pay the price for their moment of passion, for their forbidden fruit, and spend his life as the cuckolded husband with a title but no rights? Marco stormed towards the door, throwing one last insult over his shoulder. Your husband has no class. He's a shallow, petty man. I refuse to believe Isla would actually pull her investment over him. We'll see about that. He smiled sweetly at his back. I'm sure you're right, Mr. Bellini. After all, everyone has a first love. If Isla doesn't work out, I'm sure you'll find another sucker. At that, Marco stumbled over the threshold, practically fleeing the apartment. He watched him go, arms crossed. Too bad for him. His other sucker, Elena, was still just a professor trying to make tenure. Her reputation as a young, attractive academic outweighed her actual accomplishment, for now. She wasn't in a position to help him. If she had been, they never would have broken up all those years ago. Aiden, Isla's investment in Shattered City is a business decision. It's profitable for her. You don't have to do this, Elena sighed. Every word was a defense of Marco. He gave a faint smile. Professor, instead of criticizing me, maybe you should be networking with Wall Street titans to help Mr. Bellini get his funding. Behind her glasses, her pupils contracted. She opened her mouth as if to ask him something, but then just lowered her eyes, sighed, and walked away. He watched her go with a sneer. He'd orchestrated today's drama partly to vent his own anger, but it was also a test. If Elena felt any guilt, any remorse, she would have agreed to the divorce and offered him a generous settlement. That would have shown she had some shred of conscience left. But no, what a disappointment. She continued to play dumb, to evade, determined to keep him as her fool, to bleed him dry. Why make it so complicated? His friend Stefan said, poking him in the forehead. Just tell her you know Mateo is their son. She cares about her reputation. She wouldn't be able to refuse a divorce then. He didn't get his caution. He didn't know Elena. In their last life, she and Marco had gone to incredible lengths to hide Mateo's parentage for decades, without a single leak. Why would she suddenly risk her entire career and spotless reputation over a single accusation from him? Even if she didn't care about herself, she would protect Marco. He was 27, at a critical point where he needed to transition from teen heartthrob to serious actor. This blockbuster was his make-or-break moment, and with the Isla Chun rumors swirling, the last thing he needed was a scandal. Elena, who loved him so much, would never let that happen. After getting a lock of Marco's hair from Isla, he had biological samples for all three of them. He immediately sent them off for a DNA test. On his way back, Elena called and asked him to come home early. She said she was ready to talk about the divorce. He should have known it was a trap. After 3 glasses of red wine, he started to feel strange, a flush of heat, a foreign, insistent desire coiling in his gut. Elena came over, her touch supposedly supportive. She was wearing a white silk blouse he'd picked out for her. The top 3 buttons were undone, and as she leaned over him, the view was intoxicating. His throat went dry. He couldn't look away. It wasn't until she guided him to the bed and her trembling hands started unbuttoning his shirt that clarity struck him like a bolt of lightning. Elena, did you drug me? Her body went rigid. Get out, he roared, pointing at the door. The sickness in his body fueled his rage. She stood there wringing her hands, whispering placating words. Aiden, no, you just had a little too much to drink. I've been thinking, we can make this work. Whatever you want, I'll cooperate. He slapped her hard. The sound cracked in the silent room. Elena, do I look that stupid to you? You think I can't tell the difference between wine and whatever the hell you put in it? The truth was, without this second chance, he wouldn't have known. He would have thought his prayers had finally been answered. He would have been so grateful for her sacrifice that he never would have suspected the wine. Who are you putting on this show for? He spat, pointing a finger at her face. This brave martyr act? Let me tell you something. I've seen you when you're old and gray, your hair thin and greasy. I know what you look like with wrinkled, liver-spotted skin and breasts that sag to your belly. You think a little cheap drug is going to make me want that? You've got to be kidding me. The fire in his veins made him reckless, his words a torrent of poison. After his tirade, he shoved her aside, shock and humiliation warring on her face, and stumbled out of the apartment. Rain started to fall. He ran, the cold wind stinging his cheeks. He ran until he couldn't breathe, then stopped, bent over with his hands on his knees, and started to laugh. You were right, Aiden, I thought. You were absolutely right. Strip away the filter of love, and the Elena of the future was exactly as ugly and pathetic as I described. So much for the brilliant, untouchable goddess. After half an hour in the rain, he realized he was running a fever. He called Isla. When he woke up, he was in a hospital bed with a 4 in his arm. Aiden, what the hell is going on with you? Isla demanded, shoving her phone in his face. It was open to her message thread with Marco Bellini. Isla, Aiden is just throwing a tantrum with his wife and using you to feel important. He's an artist. What does he know about movies? If you really cared about our old friendship, you wouldn't be enabling this nonsense. Everyone in New York knows he's still crazy about Elena. He scrolled up. There was a video about a minute long. It was from their home security camera. Him and Elena having a candlelit dinner, gazing into each other's eyes, then him leaning on her as she helped him into the bedroom. He gave a cold laugh and handed the phone back to Isla. Then he called for a doctor and explained what had happened. Idiot. Isla hissed after the doctor left, her hands on her hips. Aiden, they can forget about that money. This is beyond insulting. Do they really think you have no one in your corner? He fought back the tears. No, I'm going to make them lose. And they're going to know exactly why. Isla looked at him, confused. Stefan was already on his way, bringing the pitch deck for the animated film we'd been working on day and night. Elena had a point. Isla's investment in Marco was a business move. He couldn't just rely on a fragile childhood crush to win her over. This time around, he was getting a divorce, but he was also getting his career back. In his last life, because of Elena's obsessive cleanliness, he gave up the art he'd spent 20 years mastering to become a full-time stay-at-home dad. Stefan had invited him to be the art director on his indie animated film back then. He turned it down, worried about Mateo's packed schedule of tutoring and extracurriculars and his inability to get along with any nanny they hired. Now, he wasn't just going to be the art director. He was going to be the producer. And Isla's investment, with or without Marco Bellini in the picture, he was going to get it. At the industry mixer the next day, Elena and a few influential people she brought along were trying to persuade Isla to reinvest in Shattered City. The film's director, Mr. Chun, was there too. I'm sorry, Mr. Chun, Isla said coolly. I've already decided to invest that capital in director Stefan's film, The Embers Cycle. Director who? People murmured, looking around. Stefan and he made their entrance, smiling. After a brief introduction, pitch books were passed around. As people flipped through them, a few influential faces lit up with genuine interest. Of course they were interested. Stefan's film was a sleeper hit in his last life. With his foreknowledge, any savvy investor could see it was a winning bet. Suddenly, no one was talking about Marco Bellini anymore. He wasn't used to being ignored, and his eyes started to turn red with frustration. Aiden, that's enough, Elena said, her brow furrowed, choosing to reprimand him in front of everyone. This has gone too far. You've dragged all these people into your little drama. You're going to lose control of this. She then turned to Isla, her expression serious. Ms. Chun, as Marco's girlfriend, you should know how important Shattered City is to him. I promise I will handle my personal matters with Aiden, and he won't bother you again. He didn't say a word. Stefan rolled his eyes so hard he thought they'd get stuck. Elena, you've only been married 6 years. Have you really forgotten what a brilliant artist he is? Isla's face hardened. She was even more direct. Aiden isn't playing games. You, on the other hand, should probably go back to your ivory tower. You don't understand this business. She then pointed at Marco. And for the record, Mr. Bellini and I are business associates, nothing more. Professor Rossi, you should be very clear on your position before you speak. Marco's forced smile finally crumbled. He slammed his champagne flute down and stormed out of the event. In a single night, he'd lost his big break and his wealthy backer, and he hadn't even played his trump card yet. Elena, whether from humiliation or concern for Marco, hesitated for a moment before rushing out after him. The other guests shot him looks of pity. He just smiled. It didn't bother him at all. The day the DNA test results came in, Elena came home drunk. The esteemed professor who hated schmoozing and the vulgarities of the business world had debased herself for the man she loved. For him, though, she had maintained a lifetime of cold, proud distance. He stared at the words on the page, 99% probability of biological parentage. His heart still seized with a familiar pain. He knew it wasn't because he still had feelings for Elena. It was the crushing realization that his entire life, his sacrifices, had truly been for nothing. The truth was just a few words on a page, but for him, it represented over 40 years. All those agonizing days and nights. All the relentless hope and delusion still gnawed at his soul. Even as he opened the envelope, a small part of him had prayed that maybe Matteo was only Marco's son, but the resemblance he'd seen to Elena was just as old, failing eyes playing tricks on him. Now that last illusion was shattered. Elena Rossi had never loved him, not one bit. In all those years, she never felt a single flicker of genuine desire for him. If she had simply been asexual, he could have accepted it. But she wasn't. She was unequivocally Matteo's mother. That knowledge trampled what little was left of his male pride into the mud. A wave of hatred washed over him, and he bit his lip until he tasted blood. "Elena," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the darkness of the dining room. "I've made a decision. I don't just want a divorce. I'm going to make sure you three get your happy ending." She stared at him in shock as he flipped on the light. "Why should I be the one to stitch your broken, dirty little world back together? This is the reality your family of three should have been facing all along," he said numbly. Elena's face went white. The drunken haze in her eyes instantly replaced by sharp clarity. She walked closer, her trembling hands reaching for the report. After a long moment, her arms fell to her sides. "Aiden," she whispered, her voice hoarse, "you know." "Yes, I know." They stood in silence for a full minute. Then she fell to her knees in front of him, sobbing as she recounted the story of her and Marco. She was a poor college student. He was from a wealthy family that disapproved of her. The night they broke up, they got drunk and slept together. Inexperienced, she didn't realize she was pregnant until 3 months later. She had to drop out of school to have Matteo. "Aiden, I'm so sorry," she cried, clutching his hand. "My feelings for him were just about regret, about the baby. It wasn't love. You have to believe me. As for intimacy, it's not what you think. It wasn't about saving myself for him." Seeing his disbelief, she got up, pulled him into her study, and took out a file. It was a thick psychological evaluation. After that night, he started seeing a therapist. "I can never get over it. I hated myself for losing control. Aiden, just give me some time." Her eyes were filled with a desperate, pained conflict. "If Matteo is the problem, I'll send him away. You'll never have to see him again. Please, can we not get a divorce? This condition I have, it's temporary." He didn't believe a single word. Elena's greatest talent wasn't in finance. It was in manipulation. She was a grandmaster. In his last life, a simple, "whether we have sex or not doesn't change my love for you," was enough to keep him celibate and loyal for a lifetime. Now, a heartfelt "my feelings for him were just about regret" was meant to win his sympathy. The world doesn't work like that. He coldly pulled his hand from her grasp. "Professor, I'm giving you 3 days to finalize the divorce. If you don't, I'll release this DNA report to the press." For the next 3 days, he buried himself in work, cutting off all contact with the outside world. Stefan told him Elena was camped outside the studio every day, even waiting by his car in the parking garage, desperate to see him. On the last day, she brought Matteo with her. He begged him to stay, calling out for his dad until his voice was raw. He remained unmoved, his heart of stone. Even Stefan was getting misty-eyed. He adored Matteo. For the past 6 years, Matteo had called him Uncle Stefan. He couldn't bear to see the boy so heartbroken. Yet he, the man who had been called Dad every day for 6 years, could be so ruthless. "Now I know you're serious," Stefan said, shaking his head. "About the divorce, about your career. You're really doing this." He took a sip of his cold coffee. The bitterness filled his mouth. Stefan didn't understand. When he was old and sick, when all his hopes rested on his son's shoulders, that ungrateful boy had looked at him with cold pity and said, "Mom and Marco are old now. They just want to spend their last years with the person they love. Can't you just let them have that one last wish? After all, you're the one who kept them apart for a lifetime." No one knew the depth of his despair in that moment. Anyone else in the world could misunderstand him, blame him, hate him, and he wouldn't have cared. But Mateo was the one person he could never forgive. He was the one who, at the very end of his life, had ensured he died completely and utterly alone, a pathetic, forgotten old man. When the time was up, he went to the courthouse as planned. Elena was there, looking pale and thin. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her lips were chapped. She looked like she'd been sick for weeks, as if a strong gust of wind could knock her over. Aiden, does it really have to end like this? He stared into the distance, his lips pressed into a thin line. She seemed to want to say more, but in the end, all she said was, "You're right to cut your losses. I can't promise I'll ever get over my issues. I shouldn't have dragged you down with me." The clerk asked her, "Are you sure you want to do this?" A flicker of regret crossed her eyes before she nodded silently. The final stamp fell, severing the toxic bond between them. Whether she was truly reluctant to divorce him or just terrified of the truth about Mateo coming out, he no longer cared to find out. As they walked out the courthouse, Isla Chen's sports car was parked across the street. Before they parted ways, Elena said one last thing to him. She said Marco Bellini was a youthful mistake, a closed chapter. She promised she would raise Mateo on her own from now on and would have no further contact with him. The sincerity and determination in her eyes made her look like a completely different person from the 80-year-old woman he remembered. 6 months later, their movie was released to critical and commercial acclaim. At the wrap party, Isla threw her arms around him, ecstatic. "Aiden, welcome back. This is the real you. I knew you could do it. You're the one who's laughing all the way to the bank," he teased her back. Stefan joked that since her investment had paid off so handsomely, it was probably time for her to head back to Australia. For the last 6 months, she'd been a constant presence at the studio, even moving her own office into their building. Their staff all joked they'd never seen a more handsome investor, whispering that maybe the Chen family had gone broke and she was betting everything on this one project. When she overheard them, she'd just laugh and say she couldn't go home until she'd landed a boyfriend. But in all that time, surrounded by the glitz and glamour of the entertainment industry, there wasn't a single rumor about her dating anyone. Eventually, everyone figured it out. He was her target. At first, he brushed it off, then he found it hard to believe. He never imagined that a simple handwritten confession from their teenage years could transform into such a passionate, relentless pursuit more than a decade later. When Stefan asked him privately if he would ever consider being with her, his instinctive response was, "Does someone actually love me?" He stared at him for a second, then burst out laughing and playfully punched his chest. "Dude, you're a multi-millionaire producer now, are you kidding me?" It hit him then. Oh right, he was 27 again. He could still dream of love, still believe that relentless devotion could be rewarded. He wasn't the old man from his last life, a man who had spent 40 years in an emotional desert, convinced he was unlovable, who had toiled his whole life away for nothing. So he told Isla that it might take a very long time for him to believe she loved him. She just smiled and said, "That's okay, I'll wait." This is weird. Elena is actually marrying Marco Bellini? That doesn't track with how she's been acting at all. One day, Stefan burst into his office, waving a wedding invitation. Something's not right. She spent months trying to win you back. Why would she do something so self-destructive? He glanced at the invitation, and his eyes were immediately drawn to the bride's signature handwritten on the card. He shot to his feet, a wild, impossible thought ignited in his mind. Elena came back too. Only he would know that this specific stylized signature was one she'd had a calligrapher design for her 50th birthday. She'd use it all the way until she was 80. On the day of the wedding, he wore a mask and snuck into the reception. After the new lead actor for Shattered City was announced, Marco Bellini had made a big, splashy declaration that he was retiring from acting. His fans boasted that he was going back to run his family's empire, that Hollywood was beneath him. It was at least a graceful exit. In reality, his family's company was failing. Marco soon found himself on the elite matchmaking circuit, but the candidates his father found were, to his taste, subpar. The tabloids frequently caught him storming out of disaster dates. It wasn't long before he went crawling back to Elena. By now, Elena was a distinguished professor at a prestigious university with a string of academic achievements to her name. The Ice Queen, as she was known, was a hot commodity on the post-divorce dating scene. Yet for some reason, She and Marco never seemed to make any progress. Whenever asked about her love life, she would state flatly that she had no intention of remarrying. During the reception, as the newlyweds made their rounds, he saw Elena turn and instinctively reach for a cane that wasn't there. He knew he was right. We've just been reborn. Some habits etched into your very bones. His heart shook. Their eyes met across the room. They recognized each other instantly. She intercepted him later in the hotel parking lot. Regardless of everything, Aiden, she said, thank you for letting me go. Her eyes were calm, as deep and still as a well. This was definitely not the same Elena from their divorce, the one still clinging to some desperate hope. He managed a faint, breezy smile. Don't mention it. We should have done it years ago. She nodded, a hint of wistfulness in her voice. Seeing you so successful, I'm happy for you. Thanks, he said. An awkward silence fell between them. It felt familiar. This was how they had existed for the last decade of their previous life. Just as they were about to part, she spoke again. I don't know why my younger self rejected Marco. Marrying my first love, that was my biggest regret. I should have been thrilled. Her voice was laced with confusion. She kept your art studio exactly as you left it. All your things are still at the house. Matteo told me he accidentally damaged one of your paintings, and she completely lost it on him. The old Elena looked truly lost. Aiden, I had an episode when I was 55. My doctor said I lost significant parts of my memory. I wonder if it's related to this. You were sick? He asked, surprised. She nodded thoughtfully. All right. I always kept my therapy sessions a secret from you. So the new signature wasn't a style choice. It was because of amnesia. Isla, wondering where he'd gone, came looking for him and came face to face with Elena. Professor Rossi, congratulations on the wedding, she said, linking her arm through his, her tone dripping with insincere cheerfulness. Elena didn't react, just nodded and turned to leave. He watched her walk away until she disappeared from view. Isla, sensing his distraction, tugged his arm, a jealous pout on her lips. What's so interesting about that old academic? She looks like she's aging in reverse, all stiff and lifeless. I'm serious, she said, puffing out her cheeks. Don't be fooled by how pretty she is now. A person like that, she'll probably be bald by 40. Once middle age hits, she'll be twice as miserable as anyone else. Her words made him laugh until his sides hurt, and a new thought occurred to him. So the old Elena really did have dementia. Elena got her wish. A year later, he went with Isla to Australia to meet her parents. You're so heartless, Mrs. Chen cried, hugging him tightly. To just cut us off like that. Even if you got married, we're still your family. Back on her home turf, with her family as backup, Isla dropped the gentle, pursuing persona she'd maintained in the States. Yeah, well, he was smart enough to call me for help this time, she said haughtily, crossing her arms. Otherwise I would have ignored him completely. I have my pride, you know. Mrs. Chen laughed. Don't listen to her. She went back to check on you, to see how you were doing. And what if I'd been doing well? He asked quietly. Isla's face darkened, and she gritted her teeth. I know you wanted nothing to do with me. If you had been happy, I would have made sure I never crossed your path again. I wouldn't have bothered you. He just looked at her, his eyes welling up until the world blurred. She immediately panicked, rushing over to comfort him. Okay, I'm sorry. That was a mean thing to say. I shouldn't have said it. He pulled her into a tight hug, feeling like the biggest blind fool in the world. All for a bit of stupid, misplaced pride. He had overlooked this incredible woman in his last life. She must have come to see him too. She must have seen him obsessed with Elena, pouring his entire being into his family and his son, abandoning his art and his future, and thinking he was happy. So she quietly went back to Australia. She respected his choices. She didn't interfere. After Isla and he made things official, he returned to the States. Stefan was in pre-production for a new film, and he needed to be there. After a long meeting, they grabbed coffee. He told him that in the months he'd been in Australia, Elena and Marco's marriage had been a complete train wreck. You know how high maintenance Matteo is, he said with schadenfreude. And Marco is a spoiled brat who can't even do his own laundry. He could picture it perfectly. Matteo with his obsessive cleanliness and hatred of strangers in the house. Marco arrogant, lazy, and allergic to housework. And Elena absorbed in her research, expecting to be waited on hand and foot. What a disaster. Stefan was practically crying with laughter. You won't believe it, but now everyone at the university knows Elena has issues in the bedroom. Marco is apparently going insane, married but getting nothing. He's not even trying to be discreet about it. Elena the Great's been knocked right off her pedestal. It's hilarious. He listened, a faint smile playing on his lips. Stefan added that during one of their fights, Elena had sighed and told Marco he'd never measure up to him. When Marco protested, she calmly and methodically listed all his good qualities, enraging him so much that he didn't come home for 2 weeks. Now the running bet on campus was how long until they filed for divorce. Meanwhile, a certain woman bogged down with business in Australia heard the rumor about Elena's condition and shrieked with delight, immediately calling him to confirm. He of course ignored her. After a new movie wrapped, Marco Bellini found him. He looked haggard, a shadow of his former glamorous self. He sat down and slid a divorce certificate across the table toward him. Aiden, you did this on purpose, didn't you? He accused. You spoiled them, made them impossible to live with. This was your revenge, wasn't it? He stirred his coffee slowly. I took care of your son for 6 years, and this is the thanks I get. He was speechless for a moment. You were so devoted. You should have just stayed with them. Why did you have to come and mess up my life? If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be in this mess. Do you love Elena? He asked. I love Isla, he snapped. Elena and I were never meant to be. We can't stand each other. Understood. Then, for both of them, love was just a calculation, a choice based on convenience. They were both selfish, loving only themselves. If they had truly been in love, how could they have gone half a century without a word, content in their separate lives? And if they weren't in love, how did they manage to coincidentally reunite the moment their respective spouses were dead, acting like passionate lovers, desperate to spend their final years together? Now he finally got it. They hadn't contacted each other for decades because they each had someone else carrying their burdens for them. They weren't willing to give up that convenience. Their grand reunion was just a cure for loneliness, a partnership of last resort. For the old Elena, being reborn meant she got to marry her first love while she was still young. But in the end, the person she couldn't forget, the one who haunted her, was him, the ex-husband she had betrayed. Elena collapsed. She was in a hospital and insisted on seeing him. Aiden, she rasped, struggling to open her eyes. I'm leaving. She reached a trembling hand toward him. He sat by her bed, watching her silently. I remember. Didn't I promise you once that besides that one thing, I would give you a husband's greatest honor, that you would be the only one, that I would never betray you? Yes, he said, not looking away. You said that. Her eyes filled with a deep sadness. But I forgot, and I got married again. So this must be my punishment. He didn't reply. She slowly closed her eyes, succumbing to the fever. He knew in that moment that the old Elena was gone. She couldn't merge with her younger self. Her life had been one of unbroken success, both personal and professional, with only one lingering regret, Marco. But when she returned to her youth and fixed that one flaw, she discovered that the mended version was far uglier and more unbearable than the original regret. She couldn't accept it. Or perhaps she couldn't face him again. For whatever reason, he no longer cared. The Elena who woke up next looked at him like a lost child, her eyes red-rimmed. When she finally processed who he was, she grabbed his hand desperately. Aiden, I'm not her. I love you. I never wanted to betray you, she babbled. You were too good to that old woman. You spoiled her. She never had to suffer the pain of losing you. But I have. I know now that I love you. Give me one more chance. I'll change, I swear. He gently pulled his hand away and shook his head. Elena, this is who you are. You can't change. Your personality makes it impossible for you to recognize and hold on to something good. You see other people's love as a weakness. That's why when her life was going well, she looked down on me, treated me with indifference, acting like my untouchable god. But the moment I actually leave, you panic. So she abused me, and now she groveled. Did she really win in their last life? Now he knew the answer. No, she didn't spend her best years with the person she supposedly loved. She could have had a passionate, vibrant life with him, but she threw it away. We wasted a lifetime tormenting each other. He finally felt a sense of peace because a person like Elena would waste her life no matter who she married. She could be reborn 100 times and would still be destined to watch happiness slip through her fingers. As for him, his conscience was clear. He still had a bright and brilliant future ahead of him. To the old man he used to be, Aiden Russo, I am ready to make peace with you. And now, It's time to say goodbye. Stepping out of the hospital, he took out his phone and dialed Isla. I said, a smile spreading across his face. I miss you. He couldn't wait to start his new life.